Welcome to Heart Speak Podcast, episode 82, Creating Magic. Well, I hope you all enjoyed diving deep through the different layers of Mother Earth's aura. It was a profound meditation for me. I've gone back to it several times and felt the different energies when I go through the various bodies or subtle bodies. You can do the same with your own physical, no, I shouldn't say physical body, your own personal aura, so that your physical body is your three-dimensional, what we say is physical. Beneath that is the etheric body, and that's the energy of the blueprint, which is what we looked at before at the first level of the elevator. And then you go down through the astral world, your own astral body, your own mental body, and then your own soul body, then the spiritual body and universal body. So you can literally go through these bodies yourself. For some of us, we may see them expanding away from us, so our physical body's here, and many times we talk about the aura going outward, spreading outward, or you can spread it inward. You can do whatever you like. You start with the physical and we work in that way. But I want to go now into our next step because we are moving on with our beautiful moon phases. And this next step is very much about how we create from that newness. It's called the crescent, the waxing crescent moon. And we're in that phase now. And I appreciate some of you are ahead of me a little bit. Apologizing for that. You may be living in another country, although we're tending to see the moon at the same stages. Just maybe the days are different. But what's important about this crescent moon is, and I haven't yet seen it tonight, I'm looking forward to seeing it for myself. It is this small slither of light that what we call the SON, the sun, whose mother has given birth to him, given birth to the light. So out of the darkness comes that slither of light, that hope, that idea, that dream that is going to fully bloom at the full moon. And I want to work with some of those concepts of creation. That's why I said creating magic. It's what creates? How do we create? We are creative beings. And if you haven't understood this by now, every reality we are seeing is part of our creation. We only see what we already know. As I spoke about, our eyes will make up what it can't see. Our ears will make up what they can't hear. And very interestingly, we're often off track. We're not seeing reality as it truly is. We may see a still photo and immediately say, oh, I know what's going on there. But you don't. And many of us who still have still photos from the olden days, our childhood, you might have the memory of what was going on around there, but there was a lot of packaging that went into that one photo. Doesn't mean you don't have still photos now, digital, but it's often interesting to go back in our childhood and say, wow, what was going on there? What was the reason that I was crying? I remember a picture of me crying, but it was tears of happiness because I just met my cousins again and I hadn't seen them for a long time. Whatever we're seeing is only a small snapshot, and often that snapshot doesn't give that full picture. And I think that's true of what's going on anyway when we're looking at the problems around the virus, etc., etc. I just want to reiterate that it's almost as if information is also just a snapshot of something. You might see it on the news, you might see it on the internet, but you don't know always, or we don't know always, what the whole story is. And of course, we can see how information can be skewed according to the teller of the story. That's often what happens. They say that history is written by the winners. The people who didn't win don't write the history. And the virus itself is a catalyst. It's a piece of, it's something that dropped into our awareness, but its consequences are going to be seen many, many years on. Of course, we can say that that's going to be financial, mental health, problems that we're seeing, where poverty, drugs, suicides, yes, all of those are consequences. But there are also consequences that have been begun because of this virus. It's like, again, a stone dropping into water and the ripple effects. But I want you to look at it the other way. It's almost the ripple effects cause the stone. Wow, there we are. It's almost as if something happened to culminate in this moment. And as you've heard me speak about, this wasn't just man-made. This was literally the positioning of our sun in alliance to the galactic center, the cosmic rays, the fact that the sun has very little activity at the moment, so we're being impacted by the cosmic rays, the belief that we're beginning a new 26,000-year cycle. And to me, all of that culminated in, if I can just call it, this drop that was the virus, or whatever we want to call it. The stone dropping happened because of everything coming. But at the same time, if we look at it individually, it also is the same. You were in the right place at the right time. I'm in the right place at the right time. Everything you've done up to now, everything I've done up to now, we're in the right place. And how the virus affected us is very much because of where we personally are in our own lives. The more that we have been able to listen within, to find that inner essence of ourselves. Maybe you've been through dark nights of the soul like I have, and you've woken up to, wow, I'm more than I thought I was. I hope that not just through dark nights of the soul, but through events in your life, you've had the opportunity to change your consciousness in an extraordinary way. And I, like you, will say, many of those times it wasn't the easiest thing, was it? You're saying, right, if this was changing consciousness, I'll stay where I was. But afterwards, we look back and we go, wow, I wouldn't have been where I am now had that event not happened. Does that make sense? So I want to say, as I'm mindful of a friend of mine who is a medium, and he'd seen thousands of people. He's older than I am. And he said, you know, Chris, when I see people, I realize that the majority of people come in on one level of consciousness and go out on exactly the same level of consciousness. And his words were profound for me. He said, it's not that they don't go and to learn meditation, or they haven't read any spiritual books, or that they wouldn't call themselves spiritual. But true consciousness is to know yourself. Know thyself. So when an event happens, that event is causing us to be more mindful of our own inner being. In other words, every event that's happening is showing us who we are. Every relationship we have is a reflection of who we are. Simple as that. And that's not always easy, because we've had terrible events and we might say, well, how would that event ever show me who I am? But everything that ever happens, just like that stone dropping, is almost in perfect time. Divine order. And you might say, how could this virus be divine order? It is. It's just a matter of how we perceive it. Now, that's not perception in our head. It's literally, how does our own blueprint, let me put it this way, how does our own blueprint gather, let me change if my blueprint is the water and that stone drops in, that stone will have a different ripple effect on my blueprint than it may have on yours, or it will have on yours. In other words, how well was my blueprint prepared for this stone? Does that make sense? So all the work you've done up to now, all the changes you've made, Again, don't get into elitism or I'm better than they are. Everything you personally have done, every part of you that you have taken on board and said, I now have a greater awareness of who I uniquely am, all that work has been worth it, because here you are now. And then that stone fell, the ripple effect will already be working through you. That ripple effect opened doors. If you'll stay with me on this idea, I know I'm changing my metaphor, a door in a piece of water, but let's say that stone dropping, the ripple effect caused the door to open. And it did for everybody, it did around the world. And I've seen metaphysically with my inner eyes how this ripple has gone through the earth. I've literally seen the earth shaking. Some people have chosen to leave through that door, but that doesn't mean that they failed. It's just literally the ripple caused them to moved through their aura, and their physical body said, well, we might as well go. Or their soul said, we might as well leave. That isn't a failure. That's just part of what the effect of the stone on the ripple, and then on the door. Hope I'm keeping my metaphors together. But the stone, we'll call it the virus, but I prefer the idea of a stone. The stone has fallen into our blueprint. And if you imagine that every cell is within the nucleus of every cell is this blueprint. We call it genes, okay, our genetic information. And as I've told you before, mentioned before, only 8% of our genes are really understood. So 91% have been dormant. Let's call them not junk DNA, but dormant, sleeping. So what's happened is that the stone dropping and the ripples has woken up our dormant DNA. Yay! And I believe the brain is under the control of our DNA, metaphysically, etherically, energetically. In other words, what we know is that when something happens, our body reacts seconds or milliseconds before our brain does. So the wakening up of our cells is now informing, that's a good word, informing our brain to also change. Many times it's said that we only use 8% of our brain, you see. So I think that as our DNA changes, as we waken up the sleeping DNA, we're also waking up the sleeping brain. All right? And I believe that however much we look at that brain, I don't think we're going to see the energetic form of that brain as well as we're going to experience it in dreams, insights, spontaneity, synchronicities. In other words, that's waking brain is like, wow, I'm seeing more, I'm smelling more, I'm using my six senses more, I know more. Is that right? It's that sort of energy that our brain is waking up to. It's almost like, oh, I'm more aware of things, I'm more aware. And that's coming, I believe, from our nucleus, our genes being woken up. So this magical creation that I'm talking about is happening because of the stone dropping at entirely the right time, divine order. And that the work we all did, and I call it work, the work we've all done on ourselves has been to bring us to this moment. Now, the more we dampen down who we are through various means, the harder it is for us to wake up to this. And again, I have to mention that meditation I received where I was told that when this magic happens, 40% of people will fall asleep, 40% of people will recreate what has just been swept away, 15% will get it and 5%, excuse me, 15% will be confused, 5% will get it. And there has been a damping down of energy. And I'm concerned how this has happened through my own profession, my own medical profession. When I was a young doctor, when I was in general practice, I realized that I was saying to 80% of my patients, keep taking the tablets. In other words, I wasn't curing them, I was just suppressing symptoms. And I went into medicine not to suppress symptoms. I went in first to say, do no harm, which is the Bible, the motto of being a doctor. And secondly, bring people back to their wholeness, not to suppress the symptoms. That's not what I see, as you know. I see illness as a messenger of the soul. I see illness as a solution, not a problem. I see that the soul will send us an illness in order to change us. And so when we use a drug or a tablet or a prescribed drug, I'm mainly talking about to actually just suppress symptoms, and even worse, to actually alter the homeostasis of the physical body, then we are playing God and we are not bringing cure. And yet large proportions of especially of the country I live in now, the US, are using drugs or prescribed drugs to suppress and change the natural environment of the body. Now, we may use other drugs. We may use recreational drugs, other drugs to calm or change our way of thinking, our way of breathing. And we say, oh, it's just calming me down. It's only just calming you down if you can stop it. If you can't stop it, then it's having a deep psycho-spiritual effect on your beingness and on your body. In other words, I've met many people who smoke up till their death when they're 100, never have a problem because they're not using it to suppress something, to calm themselves. They just enjoy smoking. So it's not the situation that causes, it's not the smoking or the drinking that causes the problem, it's why we're doing it. That's more fundamental. So that when I talk about that 40% who are still going to fall asleep or 40% who are just going to recreate, it's those who have unfortunately had their bodies changed enough that they cannot respond to the drop, the stone dropping in the water and the ripple effect. Literally their body has become static, it won't change, or the blueprint has become static. Maybe I'm again trying to change with my metaphors. It's almost as if the water I'm talking about is frozen. That would be a good way of me saying it. So when the stone drops, nothing moves. And therefore the body itself is struggling to try and move things. And as you might have heard, much of this virus has been about blood clotting and oxygen deprivation, the very things that is the movement of water. I like my metaphor there. So that if we see blood as water that flows and can be affected by this stone dropping into it, then clotting and lack of oxygen and lack of breathing are the three things we need in order to be able to have those ripples. So I'm going to be looking at what, not necessarily that the people who were dying or getting very sick had other conditions, but what were the drugs they were on that caused them to be so sick? Or let's say caused them to not be able to react. Excuse me, I'll change it to that. And I'm going to just finish with this little piece. The new vaccine that's coming in. In past times, vaccines were very much used to evoke this immune response, again, to almost like act as another stone. So the body, okay, I can react to this, I can have a ripple effect. But the new vaccines coming in, which are RNA, pieces of RNA, messenger RNA, are just like putting a new piece of gene into you. And this is not, we've never been able to create a vaccine against coronavirus. And all the vaccines we've produced have never been able to produce an immune response. In fact, often they've caused an adverse effect. So I'm wanting to say is that what we want to be able to do is to allow anything that comes into our awareness to have a ripple effect. When we stagnate ourselves, when we get stuck, no, this is what I believe, or when someone else puts an idea or a piece of DNA into our body which confuses our ability to wake up, it's like it sends us back to sleep again, then that's not good. Am I against vaccines? No, I'm against anybody interfering with my DNA or my RNA or my brain or my ability, my body's ability to listen, to respond to my own inner essence. As we move into this new crescent moon, we're going to be using a different metaphor. And I'm changing the subject now to saying, how do we do this? If everything that happens to us, every person we meet, is where we have if every time we meet someone or every event we experience has a symbiotic creative magic involved, then I want that to happen. When I'm not changing through my relationships, when I'm not changing or growing my consciousness through events, then I'm stagnant. Does that make sense? Now, that doesn't mean that someone else is influencing me. It's literally every time we relate to someone else, or as I say, to an event, we are in a symbiotically relationship where both of us will change. The very reason we create events in our outer life, the very reason we attract relationships is to expand ourselves, to allow that to waken up our DNA, to waken up our brain. That's a bit like the dots I was talking about last time. Two dots coming together only come together in order to be changed. We both change. It doesn't have to be, how can I put it? We're not looking, oh, it's a positive relationship or negative. It's just a relationship. Everything that happens is inherently changing us. So just for a short meditation right at the end of this, we're going to use the very essence of creation of magic. We're going to use things we all know. We're going to use color. We're going to use shapes. We're going to use plants. And if you want, you can use sound. The highest levels of healing are sound, color, shapes, and nature. And we're going to, in this crescent moon, plant a seed into the earth, which is what we did during the dark moon. And we're going to see this flower coming up out of the soil. And I'm going to ask that during this month, you watch how the colors, the shape, the vitality of your plant changes according to the people and the events that happen. People you meet and the events that happen. You might say, she's gone a bit crazy. No, this I want to experience. I want us all to experience the magic of creation. How it's not necessarily just going to happen. It literally is being informed, activated by our willingness to be activated, our flexibility, but also, and this is the final piece before the meditation, by our ability to know what nurtures our plant and what doesn't. So again, it doesn't mean good or bad. It just says, no, sorry, that energy I'm not going to put onto my plant's soil, and that energy I will. It still is an active nurturing by you or I making healthy decisions. Everything that's going to happen, I want this plant for us to be in our minds, so that every morning you wake up, you go, how's my plant doing? And I want us all to say, wow, it's changed color, it's changed shape, it's rejected some things that were in its environment that didn't work for it. It's developed maybe some leaves, and you could be as imaginative as you want. But I want us all to be mindful as if like we're planting a seed and we're going to see what it looks like at the end of the month. Okay? And it's just a symbol, but it's a symbol of recognizing what nurtures your soul, what nurtures you, what do you bring into it, how does your plant change and you change according to the events of this month, and how can you enhance it and make it stronger. So let's just for a few moments, if you would, again, if you're in a safe place to do this, to please close your eyes, take a few good deep breaths. Really come into your body, let go of all the thoughts, please. And I want this to be a kind of innocence, a playfulness. If you remember being a child where you planted a seed and couldn't wait to see if that seed grew, and just be like that. Oh, look what's happening. In fact, you can do this with your children. So as you now go deeper, if your feet are on the ground, that's really good. If they're not, that's okay. Feeling your feet on the ground, you are rooted in Mother Earth, as you know how to do now. Your roots deeply buried, deeply supported. And now see in front of you, you can have a garden, backyard, or you could have a flower garden, in a box garden, or you could just have a little pot, whatever you want. Please see where you are planting your seed. Let the first thought be the right one. See the soil. Later you can come back and maybe enrich the soil if it needs it, feed it, put something into it, water it. Imagine taking a seed. This is a seed of your idea that may have been given to you on the last day of the dark moon. Again, you may not know what that idea is, but imagine that you've taken this idea from the ocean of possibilities, plant it in the earth, see roots going down into the earth. It's a very quick growing plant. Those roots are tapping into the blueprint, the dragon grid, the grid of unlimited possibilities. And see, let's say, golden energy coming up through those roots, drawing the blueprint of what this seed will become into it. And now see a small shoot come out of the earth. And I want you to give that shoot any color. Let's go outside, it needing to be green. You can see whatever color you want, any shape. And on top of the shoot is a tiny, tiny bud. Again, whatever shape you want, whatever color. Let that shape be imprinted into your heart, into your mind. What is the shape of your idea? What is the color of your idea? What is the sound of your idea? Now you can go back to this. If it wasn't entirely clear, you can go back and really see it very clearly for yourself. But start to bring your awareness back to the room where you are. And if you want, draw it, paint it, write it. Make sure you have somewhere in your journal something that this looked like, so you can really be mindful of how and where it might change. And I suggest over these next few days of the crescent moon, you very much focus on how is it looking? Is it changing? And especially if there's an event, a meeting, something that happens, go back, check what nurtures this wonderful dream and this idea, what doesn't, what does it need from you, how does it change? And now you're fully back into the room where you are. We will meet again in the first quarter and work with bringing these ideas alive, being the creator of our own reality. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the HeartSpeak podcast with Dr. Christine Page. Please check out all HeartSpeak episodes in the podcast archive section on www.christinepage.com. HeartSpeak is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, and now playing on iHeartRadio. You can also watch the archive podcasts on YouTube. Connect with Christine on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, including her newest Facebook group, The Great Mother Calling. Do share with family, friends, colleagues. Join us next time for another edition of HeartSpeak.